Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday, it is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so pleased that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, USA Today bestselling author Hank Phillippi Ryan. I've written 16 going on 17 novels of suspense, and my new book coming out September 9th is on the door behind me. You are the first to see it on the door. How amazing is that, you crime timers? It is called All This Could Be Yours, about the book tour from hell. And I cannot wait for you to read it. It comes out the same day as Dan Brown's new book. So it'll just be me and Dan Brown in the bookstore. So when you hear about Dan Brown's new book, which I'm sure is going to be fantastic, he's wonderful, you just think, oh, my friend Hank Phillippi Ryan has a new book out that day as well. And it is called All This Could Be Yours. It actually looks like this, and I cannot wait for you to read it. But today we are here to talk about another new book, a fantastic new book called Blood and Treasure. Our author today is Ryan Pote, who is joining us from Casco Bay, Maine. Is that right? Saco, Maine. I knew it was some cool place in Maine. And this is his brand new book, which is just out a week ago. And it is so much fun. It is an amazing page-turning, perfect summer adventure book. Take it to the beach, take it to the ocean, take it just out in your backyard. You will not be able to put it down. It is a perfect summertime book. And Ryan, welcome. You've had this book out for a week now. Has it been fun? This is your first book.
Yeah, it's been fun, but I keep answering this question the same way that everybody asks, and they're not going to like it. But I'm like a worker. Like, I don't sit and relish when I cross the finish line. I just look for the next race. So like I have been doing other writing projects straight through this process just to not dwell on it and think about it too much. But I did take some days off, and I brought my kids, my son. This book is dedicated to my son, Ethan, who shares the namesake of my protagonist. And he signed some books with me and stuff. So we had some fun, and had some old friends from the service come visit me, who inspired the character Mona Lisa in the book. So that was kind of fun to have, some of the real life people around. But yeah, it's been fun, but I've been keeping myself busy for sure.
It is interesting though, because every book that we write is such a process, and of necessity, you're by yourself for a lot of time. Of necessity, you're second and third and fourth guessing yourself a lot of the time. And if you're lucky, collaborating with editors and people who know their stuff. And I know that you do that too as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you must have had a moment, and if you didn't, I'm going to tell you, you should, where you think, this is my book. This is my book that I worked on so hard, and people are loving it, and it is in bookstores. And this is something that I've wanted since the moment I started wanting it. You have recognized that.
Yeah. And actually, when it really did hit me was, because a lot of the work I've been doing is pre-publication. So like I didn't tell anybody in like my neighborhood that I was even an author, let alone that I had a book coming out. And some of them would find out, like, as I was getting the word out on social media or something like that. But I'm typically a pretty private person, and I prefer it that way. But when my neighbors found out, they told me they were both reading the book, and they were talking to me about it, like when the kids are playing on the, playground after work or whatever. And that's when it kind of just hit me, like, okay, yeah, I'm an author with a book out in the world that, anybody could just find, and, they're going to know me a little bit better after they read it.
Well, yes. And I want to talk about that as well too, but I do think that's interesting. There was a moment I remember after I had written a couple of books, and I went to some event, and someone came up to me and said, "Are you Hank Phillippi Ryan, the author?" And I said, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Because that person did not think of me as any other part of my life, as a reporter, as a grandmother, as whatever, but only as an author. And that's kind of a singular thing.
Yeah, it was definitely like one of those demarcating, if I can create a word there, moments in my life. Like, when you have kids, when you get married, when you make a big move or something, like getting out of the military was a big one. It was definitely similar to like a very short story. Like when I was in the Navy and I was flying planes, like your first tour, you're a junior pilot. You always have a senior pilot that's with you. You're never with someone that your rank. So you're always kind of like deferring when stuff gets interesting to that person. Oh, that person's going to get us home. Like, no big deal, no big deal. And I'll never forget my very first or my third deployment when I was the senior guy. And I went out on, kind of a scary night, and I had a junior pilot that was training for the very first time. And I was, it was kind of a scary night, and he got real quiet. And I was like, do you want to go home? And he was like, yep, want to go back. So we go back, and it's very, very quiet. Usually there's 5 people just chattering like crazy. He's very, very quiet. And as we're shooting the approach back to the ship, it was a varsity night. It wasn't like too scary, but I remember looking over to him saying, do you want me to take the approach? And he said, yeah. And he handed me the controls. And in that moment, I realized, like, we're not going to get back to the ship if I'm not the one to do it. And it was kind of like that moment where I'm like, I'm the guy now. Like, I got to grow up real fast because these other 4 people are not getting home without me. And I'll never forget that moment. I was a different person when I landed from that flight. And it was very similar when my neighbor told me they were reading the book. I was just kind of like, all right, I'm an author now. Like, here it is.
I love that. I mean, I think we're all so lucky or wise, or a combination of both, to take that moment to recognize that there is a progression in life, and that things, if we are, persistent and lucky and work hard and care about it, and, are in the right place at the right time, that these amazing things can happen, like your first novel, Blood and Treasure, which I know you worked on for so long. Let me quickly interrupt us to remind everyone that you are here at A Mighty Blaze. This is Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. A Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic more than 5 years ago now, to keep us reading, keep us writing, keep us meeting new authors and finding new books by the fabulous powerhouse duo of Caroline Levitt and Jenna Blum, who we thank every single moment for this opportunity. Quickly, we are giving away a copy of this book, not this book, and we are not giving away a copy. Ryan's publisher is giving away a hardcover, gorgeous copy of the book. So Robin Stull says, yep, you're the guy now. And now you're an author. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And welcome to you all. I see Shannon Hansen, Andrew Ball, Sue Street. Robin Stull says, great and scary at the same time. Absolutely. Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about Ryan Pote, and then I promise I will stop talking and Ryan can talk. Ryan Pote is a 12-year veteran Navy helicopter pilot, which he alluded to earlier, who was part of a joint interagency special operations task force deployed throughout Central and South America, conducting counter narcotics. Before the Navy, he was a scuba diving instructor in Hawaii and a lab tech conducting algae biofuels research. He holds a master's degree in history from Ashland University. He lives with his wife and children in New England. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, reading this fantastic book, and I have to tell you that I had to rip it out of my husband's hands to get to hold it. And today, his bookmark is in here now, and he says, bring that back.
Oh, so that's great.
Tell us, so we both loved it. And that's kind of a cool thing to realize, 2 very different readers who loved it equally. Tell us a little bit about the book in general, and then we'll talk about what the book is about.
Sure. And real quickly, thank you for saying that too, that you both liked it. And it's hard to find that kind of thing because the publisher, it is a crossover, and the publisher had a really hard time, and still is having a hard time, like where to place the book. That's kind of the risk with a crossover like this. But it starts out right in the prologue. You are thrust into Johnson Space Center Mission Control, and there is a problem with the connection to the International Space Station. There's a problem with the space station. Nobody knows what's going on, and neither do you. You're attached to a character, and you're trying to figure out what's happening alongside them. And when they finally reestablish a feed with the station, they witness an astronaut on board who has killed everybody, and then the station blows up, and they don't know why. They don't understand anything, and that's kind of where you're kicked off. Then you're set off the coast of Mozambique, where you meet our protagonist, Ethan Kane, and he's searching for something that he's almost already found. You're kind of right at the tail end of it. And he recovers this object from under the ocean. He's being pursued by this other group of people who seem to be some pretty shady people. And then as he's recovered the object and he's about to leave, the Soyuz spacecraft in a fiery ball of flame almost takes out the boat, lands into the ocean. He goes to investigate, and he finds inside a lone astronaut injured, drowning. He rescues her, and he doesn't know who she is, but the reader knows who she is from the prologue, and she's the one who killed everybody aboard the station and blew it up. And the two become intertwined, in an adventure that spans a good part of the globe, as the people who are after him for his artifact, Ethan Kane, are also after her, Mojda Zehati, the astronaut who landed from space.
And that is all in chapter 1, you guys. That is like that is all in chapter 1. It is absolutely such a page turner, and it's kind of, it's so contemporary, but it's sort of Indiana Jones type adventure meets National Treasure. It's, all those kinds of wonderful adventures that we absolutely love. Was there and we'll talk about this too. It's about power and belief and loyalty and fearlessness and friendship and all those kinds of things. But what was the first nugget of the idea? No, you know what? I'm going to rewind. You said it's a crossover. What does that mean?
So, like the publisher initially wanted to market it as like a military thriller, essentially from my background. And there is some military thriller elements in it, but you who have read it, other people who read it, and a lot of people who've read it who've come to me were surprised that it wasn't as much of a military thriller. And I think because it's not. There are elements of that from my background that I've put in there, but it's really a mystery and it's an adventure. But within those kind of subgenres, there's a supernatural element, there's a paranormal element, there's an espionage element, there are deep relationship themes and dynamics in the book that make it feel more of a drama at times. So it's, and that sounds like a lot, but it really does have a lot of layers to it. And I did that intentionally. I tried to make it as accessible for as many readers as possible. I tried to, what you said about Indiana Jones and stuff, I really tried to break down and analyze. There's so many copycats out there. Everybody loved Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I really tried to break it down, take it apart like an engine and find out why we really liked that movie and not copy it, figure out what about it made it so just lovable. And then I tried to apply that in my own way. And bridge the ancient with the modern and really modernize, my take on it.
That's such a wise thing to do. And that's, that discovery is a treasure in itself. What did you figure out about why we love Indiana Jones and his adventures? What is it about that?
I think because initially it took itself as a serious movie. I mean, there were some jokes in it. It took elements that were true, but fictionalized them for the sake of a great story. Today everyone's, if it's not authentic, it can't be in there. If it's not true and real the way it is, it can't be in there. And I like to take, elements of truth, kind of like what the Sherlock Holmes author did, elements of truth, and then just fictionalize them into the story that I want to write. And then at the same time, like a lot of people take adventure and the copycats of like Indiana Jones or this genre that Indiana Jones kind of created, everything ends up being really campy and it ends up making fun of itself. And it ends up not really satisfying everybody because they want a serious adventure that you can still have fun in, but that takes itself seriously. So that's what I tried to do with it, is to do that. That was my observation.
And I don't want to, and I'm not giving anything away, but there are lines in here that are laugh out loud funny when people are sort of people are assessing what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they relate to each other and talk to each other. And Sue Street was saying it's a mashup that gives something for everyone. But I think that's right. But I do think what people love also is just a really good story. Just that the character who you care about and a problem that needs to be solved, where the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. Exactly. And it makes sense in the world that you created. So this world that you created is pretty astonishing. Can you talk about Ethan's world and how you created that?
Sure. I mean, I kind of owe that to, I wrote 2 Ethan Kane books before this book. I wrote 5 novels before this got published. But I wrote two full Ethan Kane books, so I had a lot of room to really develop the world and his backstory and and then I wrote this one. As you can tell, it's the first book now. I didn't write them in sequential order. I just wrote another adventure with each one. So I really kind of flexed my muscles with the character. I really got to know him. I rewrote those books as I was learning how to write. So it was always with me. So when I dove into this one, I knew the characters really well. And I knew the scene and the setting. But what I tried to do different with this one than with the other 2 that didn't sell was I added these different elements to it from my study and my observation that weren't there before. And what I wanted to do was take a story that felt very linear and make it very dynamic and multidimensional. And the way I did that was advice from a friend of mine. So Mike Madden is a very good friend of mine. He's kind of a writing mentor of mine for a long time. He had the Drone series. He wrote for Clancy before Don Bentley. And now he writes for the Oregon Files series for the Cusslers. But I met him, I judged for the Cussler competition. I met him a couple of years ago, and he just started mentoring me. And he had some advice, which I think applies to all authors. You find if you have one really great idea, or if you have two really great ideas and you can somehow find a way to mash them up, then you have a great idea. So I took that principle with 3 good ideas. And I said, okay, if I have 3 good ideas and find a way to really intertwine them, then I should have a dynamic, great idea that's going to be a completely different kind of story to read. I actually thought of this story like years and years and years before I ever wrote it. I just didn't think I was good enough to pull it off, because the whole story kind of centers around, if a story is the DNA, this story centers around Mojda Zahadi, the astronaut from space. Her character, I envisioned writing a story about a character who the lines of good and bad are blurred, and the person vacillates throughout the story, believably, between being very, very, very good, very, very, very bad, and to the point where the reader gives up guessing or can't guess, and then the outcome is still so shocking yet so inevitable. And I wanted to see if I could pull that off and do that in a story. And so I built a story. I found the right story for her character, and I built it all around her.
And that's what I was going to say before I so rudely interrupted you, but that's what I do.
No, you didn't.
You totally give us her backstory so gorgeously that we understand that she's damaged and vulnerable and feels that she's been betrayed, and we are sort of with her in that. On the other hand, would we do exactly what she does? That's why we're reading the story, to find out what she does and how it all turns out. Andy Pliego is here. I know she's a massive fan of
Hey, Andy.
We're a massive fan of Andy Pliego. If you all have not read, you are fatally invited. Please go look for Andy's marvelous debut. Not right now, because we are talking about Blood and Treasure by Ryan Pote. But after the show, you can go look for Andy's book as well. You were talking about, I was asking you, hey, says Andy. Oh, I think she's been watching television. Have you watched Sirens? I think that's what that's from. Anyway, digression. So we were talking about where the first idea for this book came from. What was the first domino that fell when you got this story in your head?
Sure. So like this series and kind of what I've started to create and in the books that are coming after this are not formulaic, but they definitely have these elements now that are built into them. So I knew that I had a story that I can't give with spoilers. It's kind of hard with the story like this, but I found a couple elements that kind of lock together. Once I find that like history kind of touches in some way, that's all I need. I don't need it to be, like I said before, an element of truth. I just need it to be close enough that I can connect the dots with fiction. So once I start finding these things overlapping with, and I'm like, okay, here and here and here. And then I'm like, it's still missing something. So that story was kind of shelved forever. And then once I decided to try and mash up a completely different story idea, which was, the whole space element and the whole astronaut element was a completely different book idea that I had. And I just realized that it was really linear. It was, I wanted to do something a little more, I don't want to say complex because I don't want to scare people, but dynamic is a better word. And so I just found a way to weave her in. And then once I started trying, it just started connecting. And
I think when you for an author, when you try something and it starts working, that means that it's right. Someone told me once that if you have two good ideas, you were talking earlier about them being dynamic. It's like having a Mento. A Mento is really good, and Coke is really good. But if you put the Mento into the Coke, then kablam! And
it's like a root beer float. Yeah.
So two good ideas together are sort of more than just two disparate good ideas.
Right.
The idea of the space station element and the artifact. I mean, that is just as distant in time as anything could possibly be. And I love how you've made them connect. Can you talk a little bit about that and bridging that time, bridging that chronology?
Sure. So to kind of talk about this, it's not really a spoiler because you find out, I think, within the first 5 chapters of the book, but he's after the Ark of the Covenant. And, when you're kind of tackling a story like that, to separate myself from previous tropes that, we've already talked about, like Raiders of the Lost Ark and many other copies since then, I didn't want to fall into that trap. I wanted to separate myself. So I tried to imbue the whole story with the feeling of the Old Testament, which is where the Ark of the Covenant comes from. And if I could do that in the language, in the place settings, in the descriptive, right down to the descriptive language, everything that I did, instead of just regurgitating its history and stuff like that, I wanted to give you a feel that you were in this ancient kind of thing. And then I started getting this theme of like, from the heavens and from above. And I just started, once I kind of leaned into that theme a little bit, and then the space element came to it. All I needed to do was just try a couple times to fit it into the storyline, and I started to see the dots connecting. And I thought that it would be a really unique take to try and blend that ancient with the ultra modern. Because I opened my book with a quote from Louis L'Amour, which is kind of like my mantra for the whole series, which is often the supernatural is the misunderstood. And I kind of thought that lended itself well to, taking ancient supernatural things and trying to bring them to the modern world and explain them in a scientific, ultra modern way. Yes. And so that's kind of how it came to be.
Somebody's famous quote about how when we don't understand something, it's magic until we study it, and then we realize it's science, and that's it's physics, and that's how the world is. But I do think, again, we're talking about Blood and Treasure by Ryan Pote, just out a wonderful page turner of an adventure. Your epiphany when you realize that something that comes from above can be a belief system, or the 10 Commandments, forgive me, or a spaceship that is carrying something. It all sort of depends on how you look at it. Like, when the first time somebody saw Halley's Comet, what did they think that was? So when you pitched this to your editor, what did you say?
Well, I didn't say anything because my fantastic agent took the reins for me on that. But when I pitched it to him, I told him, which is Mark Tavani, I was introduced to him, and I was given an opportunity to speak with him on the phone and see if he would read something that I wrote. And I told him he wanted to know why I wrote this book. And I told him, or why this book is different from other books. And I told him this book is different from other books because the character is born from real trauma. He's born from me working through PTSD, from me actually having these experiences and working them out on the page of a journal in therapy. And that ended up creating a character. So he came out being really, and he was a mashup of a couple of friends of mine who didn't fare as well. So he became this memorial. He became this, very authentic, different kind of character that I think hadn't really been touched on as much in the thriller genre. And it's really, and when you can find something that's actually new and fresh today, that's pretty much worth its weight in gold. And so that was kind of what I led my pitch with or whatever. And then he read it, but we only had one offer, and it was Tom Colgan. And when Tom got this book, it didn't really have the paranormal supernatural elements to the full that it did. I actually added those later. It was actually post editorial. It came back to me. He gave it to his assistant because I turned it in early, and she gave it a half read to do some training. And so I got another take at it, and I had been reading it and reviewing it. And I'd got some notes from my film agent about leaning into the adventure treasure hunting thing more. And I just I got the book back, and there were a couple of minor notes, but I took the entire book apart think I added about 4,000 words, but they were all over the book because I literally broke the whole story apart and put those supernatural, paranormal like elements that made it more of a crossover into it. And then I turned it back into Tom, and I was like, "Don't be mad," with this really long list of changes that I made in every chapter. Like, okay, the whole book is different now.
Guys,
But
I mean, it's fantastic. That is such a writer's journey, and that is such a testament to your great idea. As Margaret in the back room is saying, leave a question or a comment in the comment line here, whatever you call that thing, chat, and you will be entered to win a copy of Blood and Treasure. So you and the fabulous Mark Tavani, your agent, and the fabulous Tom Colgan, genius editor, have come together to do this absolutely brilliant book. And I have to say, going back to your what you were talking about and what Robin Stahl is talking about now too, an excellent way to honor yourself and your friends. Working through PTSD on the page is really equally brave to landing a plane on an aircraft carrier with someone who's terrified. That is a massive step and a massive leap of faith to do that with and for yourself. Wasn't it? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I never wanted to be a writer. It wasn't even on my bucket list. It wasn't even in my sphere of things I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to be a career military pilot. And when that ended and that was taken away from me and I couldn't fly anymore medically, I needed to kind of figure out what I was doing. I was in a job that I kind of fell into because all my other prospects had to do with flying. It wasn't really satisfying. I was an investigator, and COVID happened, and everything was really unsure. So I was dealing with PTSD, having stopped flying. It's like it's a little easier to like a lot of pilots go through this. They're fly, and you're always on. Your body's always on. You're always like 3 seconds from death. You just got to be on your game all the time. And then when you take like 3, 4, 5, 6 months out of the cockpit, your body starts to relax, your sympathetic nervous system starts to relax, and stuff starts bubbling up. I was in complete denial that I had PTSD. It was my wife who was really like, something is not right with you. Like, you are not the same person. I've noticed it for years now, but you need to go see somebody. So I did. I saw like a civilian therapist, and accepted that I had PTSD, because once I started like really taking it seriously, I was like, okay, yeah, I can't drive at night. I'm having panic attacks all the time. I can't multitask anymore. Like, I was a pilot in the Navy. I could do 25 different things at once and text my wife for dinner at the same time. All of a sudden I would do 2 things and it would make me feel like I was drowning. I was angry all the time. I couldn't sleep. So I accepted it, and I started talking to somebody, and they were like, you need to just write about your experiences in the morning before work, just journal. So I started journaling about everything. And then they were like, that's phase 1. Phase 2 was you need to talk about it in a group setting with random people. And I was so fresh off of all the counter narcotic stuff that I didn't want to talk about drug cartel stuff. I just felt uncomfortable talking about the details of the different stories that I was writing about. So she was like, just fictionalize them. Just change the names, person, place, or things. It's all about your experiences, your feelings, and what you were feeling in the moment, to talk about them and get them out in the open. And she's like, it'll help you. And I started doing that, and it started fixing me. And I didn't need the therapist anymore. I just needed to write in this journal, and I just needed to keep writing in the journal. So I did that. And then I was like, oh, writing is really great. I'm going to write a history book or something. But then I got kind of inspired to write fiction. And I was like, well, the fiction's little stories, short stories, essentially, were what were really fixing me. You get into that zone and your mind just starts, other writers can appreciate that. So I started looking into what if I wrote a book. So I did. And so I wrote 5 of them over the course of years, trying to get published, and just dedicated myself to the craft of writing. And I just said, this is what I want to do. I said I would give myself 5 years to do it. I didn't tell my wife I was doing it either until the first 2 years in. I'd written I'd written two books first, and I finally told her I was writing. But
was she happy?
No, at first she was like, "You're writing a book?" Like, okay, whatever. And I was like, no. And then she read one, and I was like, should I keep trying to do this, or and I wasn't like all in yet. And she was like, She read it and she was like, yes, you should. So I went all in. I mean, I gave up every hobby I had. My friend group got really small. If it wasn't family, work, or taking care of myself, it was 100% devoted to writing and the craft of writing and rewriting stuff and, querying. And
I 100% love your poster behind you. Nobody cares.
yeah, that's it.
Great. I'm stealing that for myself. We're running out of time, and this is so frustrating.
Sorry.
Because so many things to no. It's you are fantastic. We're talking about Blood and Treasure by Ryan Pote. You do not want to miss this. And as Margaret is saying, if you want a signed edition with a Roman coin from Ryan's personal collection, woo,
yep.
Visit this website. But let's talk about that for a second, because I have a couple more questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And I see so many wonderful people are here today. Andrew Ball and
that's nice.
Stephanie and Vicki Gregory is here. Rogue Women Writers are here behind you, Melanie Morelli. So nice to see you all. The research in this book, Ryan, is unbelievable. It's unbelievable because it's fascinating, it's new, and it is seamlessly interwoven into this story. We've all read books where somebody read about medieval armor and by golly they're going to put everything in, but yours it really makes sense, and it really feels like it comes from your authentic knowledge of history and your authentic experiences in your own life. Can you talk about that element of this?
Sure. The authenticity piece, like if I know about it, whether it's history or if it's flying or diving, if it's something that I'm a subject matter expert on, then I do what I call let my fingers fly. I just really just go, and I'll tamp myself back in editing a little bit, but I let myself go. When it comes to the other stuff, like I get that a lot, is that which I guess I'm very proud of now, that the research was seamlessly blended in. It wasn't an overload of, and it goes back to my process of writing. So I approached it as a historian. So as a historian, you do not just endlessly research primary sources. You will read hundreds of thousands of old English texts and you won't get anywhere. So you have to come up with your hypothesis first and then go find the research. That's how you do historiographical research. So I approached writing a book naturally that way. So I wrote I would get headlines and elements, and then I would kind of weave a story together loosely with almost no research. And then that would be my hypothesis, is the logic of A to Z in my story. And then I would say, okay, I need to make this work. So now I know exactly where the targeted information I need. And then I'm going to go get that. And then if I found a place where it didn't quite work logically, or I couldn't fictionalize it enough to make it believable, then I would alter it as necessary. Or sometimes, you find cool things that make it work better, or, so I would do that. And then if I was in the story, and, because I don't stick 100% to my outlines, and my outlines are very vague. Sometimes a whole chapter is just, he gets away. So, I'm kind of a pantser at the same time. But if my story trailed off and I found a totally different angle, I would do spot research for those kinds of things as well. But I never dwell. I hear people, saying they get lost in this research. I mean, I do about 3 weeks of honest outlining and researching, and I just go. I just get right into it. Because to me, the story is king. So if the story works in my outline, the logic works. I know the story's going to work. Now I just have to make it fun, and I have to make the characters real now. So,
I mean, I love what you said about when you find the cool thing that you didn't know. That is just all those jewels is just so much fun. But it sounds like you also not only did historical research, but you're doing your personal research inside as well. And also, you alluded earlier to that some of the characters in the book get their inspiration from people in your real life. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Sure. Yeah. Almost every single character in the book is some way, shape, or form someone I interacted with at some point. And that's why their dialogue feels real. That's why the way they speak is different naturally. And that's just because it's like doing impressions. If you can be really good at impressions, like most authors are probably pretty good at impressions. So you have to be kind of the Jim Carrey of characters. And the easiest way to do that is to pick a person. When someone tells you to do an impression, they say, do your Jack Nicholson impression, and you try and become Jack Nicholson. Well, it's the same thing with writing a character. You pick somebody who you think embodies the person you want, or you're thinking about in your head, that and you already know how that person's going to react. And a great example of that in this book is there's a Somali man in the book, Savu, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody, but he's a very unique little, he's a blip in the book, but he's a very unique little character, and the things that he says are very unique. The way he talks is very unique. The way he sees the world is very unique. And that character and his dialogue and everything was a cab driver I had in another country that I talked to for hours on a cab ride. And I never thought I would use him in a book, but I never forgot that conversation. And I never would have had that in my head if I didn't talk to him. So, they come from everywhere. You never know as a writer where they're going to come from. But yeah, some of them were my friends. Some of them are people who are not with us anymore. Some of them are people who are and are very close to me. Some of them are people who are and are very not close to me. So
it's such an odd. It makes us feel like we know them and that we understand your connections with them, and we know that there are treasures we are talking about blood and treasure. We know there are treasures in this book that are very personal to you, and that makes the book even more fun to read. One of the things I've noticed about you and your world is that there is a sort of community of authors who have been in the service, have been in the military profession, and they have so surrounded you with support and affection.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about them and what that means to you?
Oh, they're incredible. I mean, you never know when you come into like a new job, because like when you're in the service, right? Like in it, not on the outside. I mean, the most endearing thing someone can do is pretend they hate you and haze you and make your life just miserable. And that's like our way of loving on each other, right? Because we're all preparing each other in some way, shape, or form for when life gets hard, which it does. So that's kind of like the in the military thing. So getting out of the military, it's like, how is everybody going to still treat each other? Like, am I going to get hazed by all the fellow military authors or whatever, And I knew I wasn't going to, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I? I'm the new guy. Here we go. Because I'd know what to expect otherwise. But no, it's been the exact opposite. And I've almost felt like the military authors, like Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson in particular, are almost like just stepping in front of me to shield me from the bullets. Like that's kind of like how I feel. They're not doing that, but that's just kind of how I feel as the new guy coming in. And I'm a little bit younger than a lot of them because I was separated from the service a little bit younger. But so they kind of have this older brotherly kind of feel to it. But yeah, it feels like that. And I know them all. I know some of them better than others. But yeah, it's a really great feeling to have the kind of support from them. It feels very genuine, and I almost don't even know how to repay it at this point, other than just continue to support each other going forward.
I mean, that's what Brian is such a good friend of mine, and he speaks so highly of you. But I can tell you, Ryan, you are landing your own plane in this book. You have a good crew, and they are very loyal. But this is all you, and it is really, really fun. Margaret, let's get ready to have some questions from people in the audience. I know that we have some. Oh, Andy, that was fast. What was the most bizarre thing you had to research for this particular book? Says Andy.
Well, I can't say that because it would be a huge spoiler for the book. But what I will say, the most bizarre thing that I had to research for this book. So some of the things that I had to research for this book, I already knew because I worked in Joint Interagency Task Force South. So we did counter transnational criminal organizations, not just drug cartels. So there's some threads about like Rosewood. I get that a lot. Like, oh, you researched all this stuff about Rosewood. No, that was actually part of my day job. But the space station, honestly, was the most challenging thing to research for this because you're never going to get it right. It's so big. And when I started researching it, I quickly learned that I needed to change how I was going to write the story because it was going to bog the reader down with the details that were unnecessary. And I needed to find a way to tell the story where I didn't need all those minor details, where I could get enough to make it feel real. So I chose to tell the story in a different way, and I don't want to kind of give it away too much. But what happens in the book is something happens on the station, and throughout the whole course of the book, there's this other thread of mission control figuring out what happened after the fact. So it kind of removes you from the station a little bit, and I could get away. I don't want to say get away with, but yes, get away with not having the in-depth knowledge of like an astronaut. But I will say really quickly that, you know, a personal friend of mine and an ISS astronaut and a former test pilot, I flew with him once. It's Joe Edwards. He's a former shuttle astronaut and ISS designer and at NASA. And he recently read the book and told me I was like 95% on the money, which was just like the best feeling an author could ever get.
And the 5% is stuff he's not allowed to tell you anyway. That if you knew, it would be a problem, right? It's probably
yeah. But the best feedback he ever gave me was he was never pulled out of the story once, having done that for a job. So I was like, that's all I needed to hear, man.
I mean, people and the rest of us who know nothing about anything. Lee Child always talks about how he had someone come up to him and say, "Oh, you must have done so much research about there was some sort of massive tank that Reacher was in. And, you know, how did you know that the button on the dashboard was red?" And Lee's like, "I don't know. I just made that up. It just seemed like it ought to be red." And, you know, he famously alleges he doesn't do any research, but what feels right. And, you know, you can get it to feel right, which you did by dint of actual research.
Thank you. Yes.
And I love that you got that sort of attaboy from someone who really knows their stuff. Who else has a question? Marcia, hey, welcome. It sounds so good. Yes, indeed. We're talking about Blood and Treasure by Ryan Pote, brand new, just out last week. How did you know the other books in the series had to go on the back burner? What a thoughtful question.
So when I met Mark Tavani, he read all the work that I ever wrote first, and we collectively decided which book we would go out with first. And to be completely honest, I was a better writer after about the third book. Between the second and third book, something changed in me, and I became a completely different writer. And books 3, 4, and 5 were just set up above. And you know, those books were there, but they weren't of the standard of this book. Like, I wouldn't even want to put them out now because they weren't what this became. And I became better, but I also figured out how I wanted this series to be, and it's much different now. So I actually cannibalized. Well, I didn't cannibalize. I took Mark Greaney's advice to me, which was, what do I do with those books? And he told me, pick them clean for every good idea, good piece of dialogue, good character, until they're a carcass. And I did that with one of them, and you guys will see a lot of that in the second book in the series. And I'm so glad I did, because what ended up coming out of that was just something that I'm super proud of. So
that's such a great image. I can see it, because you can take a perfectly good turkey and make turkey tetrazzini, and it's even better.
Yeah.
The second day, this is a recipe metaphor. Anyway, let's do one last question, Margaret. But Shannon Hansen, hey Shannon, says, was this always the title?
No, it was not. So my original title that I went out with was Break Glass, and it wasn't really as treasure hunty as it was until I changed it. And when I was editing it for submission with Mark, he told me I needed a new title. I needed something that would convey the series better. And so I
in the book.
Go ahead.
You still have Break Glass in the book, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah, because it was a theme in the book, and I thought it fit well. But he was right. I needed a title that kind of told people what this series was going to be about, and because it was too different to call it like some kind of thriller title. So I went to the drawing board, and I reread it like 4 times. Actually, on Speechify, I just read it back to me, and I just like was listening for the themes that were there that I needed to pull out of the book, and I found Blood and Treasure in there, and it wasn't as prevalent as it is now. I felt it in there, and I just leaned into it and enhanced it and wove it into the fabric of the series. So and then I chose that as a title, and then when we submitted it to Penguin, they went with it and they loved it. So I got to pick the title, and it was great.
It's perfect, absolutely perfect, thematic and adventurous at the same time. My last question, I'm gonna leap here again. Tell us about the Roman coin.
So which one?
Well, what you said on your website, if you do, or the Roman coin cover, or the ones in your collection.
All of them. Yeah. So I have a bunch of Roman coins. So I've been collecting coins since I was a kid. I started with pennies, which are probably going to become really valuable nowadays, and dimes and quarters, like a lot of kids, from the late 80s maybe did. And then when I got in the military and I started traveling around a lot, I started like buying cool coins that I would, keeping change from different countries that you would go to. And I started kind of doing that. It was kind of just something I did. And then, you can invest in like gold and silver and stuff. And a lot of people do that, but you can also invest in like gold and silver, actual ancient coins that have a little more intrinsic value, or excuse me, a little more subjective value than intrinsic value. And that's kind of an alternative investment. So I kind of started to do that a little bit, but then I found out that museums, when they gather these coins, they don't have the money to like preserve all of them. So they'll find a cache of Roman coins or Byzantine coins or Greek coins, and they'll take some of them and they'll clean them up and they'll preserve them for the museum. But then they have this giant chunk of rock basically, and they sell them for like $50 or $75, and you can buy a big chunk, and it becomes a hobby. You have to like clean them and separate them and preserve them and figure out which ones they are. But that they're all the coins in there are legitimate coins because the museum has verified it. So you end up, and sometimes you get some really great gems. I found a lot of really great silver, coins in those little bundles and stuff. But I have a ton of bronze Roman coins, and it just seemed like a really great. I'm not very sentimental. It seemed like it fit really well when I changed the series to Blood and Treasure, and I kind of leaned into it. It just, everyone's trying to be different and break out in here. And I'm like, you know what? I could sink a bunch of money into ads, or I could give away my collection of Roman coins.
That's great. I've never seen that. I've never seen that before. And you'll see on the cover of Blood and Treasure.
And it's kind of, and in the military, it's typical to give away like a challenge coin. That's like a big military officer thing. So, the way I put them in these little rounds, which are kind of the size of a challenge coin. So it's kind of like my riff on, being in the military. Instead of giving out a challenge coin, I'm giving these coins out.
I love that. So put that up one more time, Margaret, in case people.
This one right here is the one I'm giving away for the giveaway with this book. This is Emperor Tetricus. So this is like about 300 to 380 AD. And you can still see his bust on there pretty good. And what they did was they debased the silver in these as the Roman Empire fell. So as you get further and further away from 325 AD, the silver in the coins decreases and decreases and decreases. It becomes more bronze, higher copper content. So they become a little more of that greenish tint as time goes on. If they're black, they have a lot more silver in them than.
See, anyway. This is valuable information that we would not know, that you would not know, all of you, if you did not come to Crime Time and hear from the fabulous Ryan Pote with his brand new Blood and Treasure. When I look over here, I'm looking at the comments. I see Andy Pliego says, such a great idea. Vicki Gregory says, thanks, Ryan, Hank, and AMB for an intriguing discussion. Excited to read this. Shannon Hansen says, neat. Brenda Gaskell says, neat idea for the coins. And Melanie says, that is such an amazing giveaway. Susie Baldwin says, very cool idea, Ryan. Yes, indeed. Ryan, thank you. Thank you for being here. And
thank you for having me.
We're going to spin the wheel of fun now and see who wins a copy of Blood and Treasure. We will spin the wheel. I love this so much. Only Margaret in the back room knows how it works. So this is her magic. And the winner is Andy.
Oh my goodness.
Has the book. You have the book, Andy, don't you? We'll just spin one more time.
It's okay. Oh, okay. She does already.
We'll spin one more time. We love Andy, but we need to have you have a new fan. And this winner that Andy Pliego is gracious enough to give the book to is Robin Stull, a wonderful reader and a good.
The book is signed, and it also has this little QR code in the front. And when you scan that and scan the cover, there is an augmented reality interactive experience on the front. So you can find that QR code on my website. Everyone can click on it and do it, but you get the sticker in the book.
I love that. And this whole thing is an augmented interactive reality.
Yes, it is.
Right. That's exactly what we are doing here right now. Let me hold on to you for 1 second, Ryan, to remind you all that next week at 4 p.m. ET, we will be talking to the fantastic Sherry LaPena, who is just the queen of twists and a wonderful brilliant, genius writer. Every book of hers is absolutely incredible. She's a #1 international bestseller, and her brand new book came out today. She didn't see it coming. We will be talking to Sherry next week. If you live around me in Massachusetts, I'll be talking to Sherry LaPena in person at Unlikely Story Bookstore at 6:30 on Thursday. So do come see Sherry and me in person. We would love to see you. If you can't make it, if you live far, far away, or even just too far away, come back here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, and you will be able to talk with us in person, an augmented reality experience such as this is, and you will be able to win a copy of She Didn't See It Coming. Ryan, you are amazing. Congratulations on this. It has just been so great to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
And you know what? I'm going to push you. When does the next book come out? When people get hooked on this, and they will, when can we look for
So the next book comes out June 2nd, 2026. And it's already turned in and in production. However, if you read this and you really enjoy it, there are multiple things that are going to keep you going until the next book. There's tie-in content that's completely free. There's interactive experiences that tie into this book that are completely free through my website. There's hidden passages on my website with codes in the book that unlock them. I'll start to unveil that stuff come September through December, so everyone will be able to enjoy Blood and Treasure a little bit more until the next book comes out. Wow. I was thinking of you all. I was thinking of you.
That is great. And that is absolutely irresistible. I cannot wait to go unlock some treasure on your website. We will do that. And as Margaret in the back room says, follow Ryan on Insta, RyanPoteBooks.com. Follow me too at Hank P. Ryan. And we will follow you all anywhere. And we will see you next week, next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Have a wonderful week. We will see you next time. And remember, it is always safe inside a book.